Welcome to Better Teaching, Only Stuff That Works, a podcast for teachers, instructional coaches, administrators, and anyone else who supports teachers in the classroom. This show is a proud member of the BE Podcast Network, shows that help you go beyond education. Find all our shows at bepodcastnetwork.com. I am Gene Tavernetti, the host for this podcast, and my goal for this episode, like all episodes, is that you laugh at least once and that you leave with an actionable idea for better teaching. A quick reminder, no cliches, no buzzwords, only stuff that works. My guest today is Joey Davis. Joey is currently in his 38th year in education. He began his career as a walk-on coach while attending college, later earning his degree in history from Cal State University, Fullerton. He spent 17 years in the classroom before moving into full-time administration. He went on to earn his master's degree in educational technology from Azusa Pacific University, followed by his administrative credential. Joey is now in his 10th year as a principal and proudly serves the Brea Olinda community as principal of Brea Olinda High School. On a personal note, Joey's been married to his wife, Rachel, who also works in education as a school social worker. They have two sons, ages 25 and 27, both of whom are college graduates and are just beginning their professional careers. I think you're going to find this one interesting. Joey, welcome to Better Teaching, Only Stuff That Works.
Thanks, Gene. I'm really excited to be here. It's my first time on a podcast, so hopefully I don't embarrass myself too much.
Oh, you're going to be great. You know, I did read your introduction, but I kind of wanted to go a few more details in your journey to where you are now, yet principal at Brea Olinda High School. So what roles did you have coming through in your career?
I've kind of meandered around a little bit, Gene, but for the most part, I've been in schools for over 40 years now. I started out coaching at lower levels, basketball and softball, and then I did my student teaching, and I got hired fresh out of student teaching at Charter Oak High School in Covina, and I taught economics and was the varsity softball coach and varsity assistant basketball coach. And then I went on after just a few years to Walnut High School and continued coaching both sports for the most part. I stopped and started a little bit when my wife and I started to have kids. I don't want to take too much credit for that. So I was at Walnut for 14 years total, but about 10 years in, they approached me to take a different role. And so I was an instructional dean. And Walnut has some different systems than any place else I've ever heard of. But an instructional dean is basically an assistant principal over just curriculum. And so I had special education, applied arts and technology. And so I had kind of some smaller departments that I managed. And so I managed the budget for them. I worked with the teachers a lot. I did all the observations. I did all the teacher evaluations. It was just a different system where there was one principal, one AP. It's a big high school. And then at the time, there were 4 instructional deans. And we kind of focused on the teachers and what was going on in the classrooms. After doing that for, I think, about 4 years, I moved on to Placentia Yorba Linda Unified. I was assistant principal of curriculum at Valencia High School. They were starting off an IB program, and both Walnut and Charter Oak had IB programs. So I was somewhat involved in both of them. And I had also somewhere in there gotten my master's degree in applied arts and technology. And Valencia was creating a tech magnet at the same time. So that was a great experience. I loved my 6 years at Valencia, but all good things come to an end. I got recruited or told to go over to Yorba Linda High School and be an AP over there. They were hopefully grooming me to be a principal someday, is what they told me. And I said, I'm not in a hurry, but we don't make all the decisions in life. Sometimes somebody else does. And so I did that for a year and a half. And in the middle of the next year, I was approached by the superintendent and said, hey, we've got this new thing or 2 new things coming in, CASP and the LCAP, and they asked if I would come help manage those at the district level. And I said, no, thanks, I'm good. And about 2 months later, I moved offices again, and I was at the district office doing that job. After 2 years, they could tell I wasn't loving it. I really like the energy of a high school campus. I've never worked anywhere else that I would really want to work. And so they approached me. There was an opening at El Dorado mid-year for principal, and I don't even think I paused. I think I was like packing my office before they finished answering the question. I did call my wife and ask if she was okay with it, and she said reluctantly yes. because, being a high school principal is a big commitment. There were some other things that, my son was actually a freshman at the high school at the time at El Dorado where I ended up. And so that was a little bit of an interesting experience as well. So, and then after 8.5 years at El Dorado, I decided I needed to start interviewing again, and I ended up here at Brea Linda High School. And I'm thrilled to be here. It's actually where I started my journey. I did my student teaching here 38 years ago, actually at the old high school, which they've since torn down and built a new one. So it's been an amazing ride. I'm nearing the end, but I don't know where the end is or when it comes, but I've loved it.
Well, you know what I think is interesting about all your moves, and tell me if I wasn't listening correctly, that somebody approached you and asked you to make a move. It wasn't like Joey's sitting in the classroom teaching his humanities courses and said, I'm going to make the leap.
No, it was very much so. I remember I was actually making copies at Walnut whenever that happened. And the principal, who I just admire greatly, passed away a few years ago, Dr. Ken Gunn, came and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, when you're done making copies, come to my office." And that's the one where you get scared and you go, crap, what did I do? What kid did I upset today? Who did who was I rude? You just start thinking of all the things that can go wrong. And I walked into his office and he said, "Sit down. I want to talk to you about your future." And I'm like, "My future? Oh God, am I getting fired?" And it's all those irrational fears. Maybe I'm the only one who carries those around, but and so yeah, it was totally him approaching me. And then a few years later, when I started at Valencia, I was approached by somebody I'd known from the other side of Walnut, Diamond Bar. And so it's, yeah, there's been a lot of that. I don't know what that says, if I'm just lucky or fortunate, or somebody would probably call it the good old boys network, but I think sometimes hard work pays off.
Well, I think that's what a lot of people would say, that if you do a good job, you get recognized. I think that's one of the things about in education. I don't think it happens frequently enough that people are recognized for hard work, but they certainly get recognized right away if somebody wants to make a change. So just a quick question. How big is the Brea Linda? How many students do you have? And
The high school here is about 1,650 kids. The district is 6,000. We are the only high school in Brea. There's a continuation school that's pretty small, one junior high, and then six elementaries.
and how about APs? Do you have?
I'm really fortunate. The 18 years I was at Placentia Yorba Linda, at Valencia, Yorba Linda, and El Dorado, it was two APs and a principal. Here I'm fortunate enough, we have three APs. So it's a different model with a different setup, but I'm really fortunate and I work with some really good people.
Now, you said when you first went into administration, you were a dean, and in that role, you were working with curriculum teachers doing that. How much do you get to do of that now in your current role?
Probably less than I'd like, less than you would imagine. I mean, a lot of it is like delegation, where I'm asking my APs to maybe take on some of these things. We're bringing a dual language immersion program into the secondary world here in Brea right now. And so I've been really involved in those. But as far as planning curriculum, if I don't feel like I have something to offer, like dual language immersion, I don't speak another language. I was born and raised in the South. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. We barely speak English where I come from. And so I don't feel like I have a lot to add as my own personal expertise. And so that's where we would bring in somebody like Kabe and let them be the experts. But if you wanted to talk social science or something like that, oh yeah, I absolutely am gonna, have 2 cents to throw in. And so it just kind of depends on what it is and how well I can lean into it.
Now, has that been the case wherever you've been, where you've been a principal?
Well, in Placentia, you didn't have a choice so much because I was the curriculum AP. And so I was essentially, at all the high schools I was at when I was an AP, so both of them. And so it just depends on the structure, I think. So, I've never taught math, but I've been in a lot of math classrooms, and some I could tell you were much more effective than others, much more engaging. And so the challenge is, how do you bring that to teachers? I'm not going to tell you how to teach it, like what the steps are to solve the math problem, but I can help you understand, like, when you lost your class more, not so much the discipline side, but just the engagement side.
And that's based on your experience as a teacher.
Yeah, my experience as a teacher and being an admin for 20 years.
So you've been in a couple districts, and are the districts, as a principal, can you describe how districts are different?
Well, I can try. I mean, this is my second district I've been a principal in, my fourth overall. And the first one, Charter Oak, I was only there for 3 years and I was a baby. I didn't know anything administration wise. I didn't even know when to shut up for the most part. So the at Walnut, it was there's two high schools, and each of the schools was very much driven by its leader, the principal at the time. And Dr. Gunn had a really interesting philosophy. He kind of felt like the more accolades we could bring to the school, the less intervention the school board or the district office could provide. So he would go out and make sure we applied for every blue ribbon, every distinguished school, any award that we could get, he would make sure we applied for, because then when the district would come in and say, well, you really need to do X, Y, and Z, he'd say, really? Look at the blue ribbon thing on the wall. Look at the Distinguished School Award on that wall. And that was kind of his explanation of how things worked. He did an amazing job of, I think he would say, and the teachers would agree, of protecting the staff from all those things that the school board might think were really important initiatives. And that's an interesting challenge, and he had an interesting way to do it. But he'd been there forever. I mean, he literally opened the school. He was the first athletic director and football coach. So, it takes a certain amount of street cred to do something like that. But in Placentia Yorba Linda, there's a balance to be held there. The some principals certainly have more say so based on their experience and their value to the school and the school district. But in general, when you're like you were saying with me personally, when you as a school are tapped on the shoulder and said, you guys should probably think about doing this, then you frequently need to start thinking about doing it.
So that's an interesting description. You talked about, again, I'm going to translate what I thought I heard you say is that you had a superintendent who was I don't want to say shielding you, but kind of protecting you from the board. Is that an accurate way to say that?
Well, that was the principal shielding the staff, the teachers from the board. And so that's a little different. Dr. Gunn was the principal.
Okay, okay. He was the principal. Okay,
Yeah.
and
And I think in my time in Placentia, going back to Dr. Dennis Smith and my early time there, there was a sense that there was some sort of a picket fence that was like one way where, you shouldn't, as a site administrator or a teacher, you shouldn't ever get a call from a school board member asking you a question about the school or about what was going on in the school. It should come from the district. And so I can go back to Dr. Smith, and he's probably been retired, I don't know, 10 years now. But he and Dr. Doug Domini definitely had that philosophy of, the school district does the work. The board provides the guidance to the school district, not to the schools. And so it's an interesting philosophy. And I was able to flourish under it, as long as it was that way. Yeah.
so you've been in schools long enough, 40 years, to have lived through lots of initiatives. People can't see your face, but yeah, you said you lived through lots of initiatives. Okay, so have you, as an administrator, then you can have, even as a teacher, have initiatives been introduced where you just thought, this is crazy. This isn't something that we're really going to do.
Yeah, that has happened. I think in general, I would say, Gene, that we're all suffering from initiative fatigue. There's so many good ideas out there, but you can't implement them all at once. But there are some bad ideas out there, and I'll tell you that. I can give you an easy example. In my last school district, we had a principals meeting, I don't know, some Thursday morning or something like that. And the superintendent came in. He wasn't on the agenda, but that's fine. He's the superintendent. He came in and sat down, and he basically told us we weren't going to suspend students anymore. And he said, educationally, I don't think it's very sound, and suspending students is not something I'll approve or not something I would encourage. And if you feel the need to suspend a student, you need to call me and we will discuss why you need to do that. And I'll decide, meaning he would decide, if we were allowed to suspend the student or not. This was when the dashboard was just kind of coming out. And we were then asked in this principal meeting, he said, I'm going to go around to each one of you and ask you how you feel about that. And, me, again, not being very bright, not being, the smartest guy in the world, answered him. And I said, well, I don't really think that makes sense. We have a responsibility to maintain a safe campus for our students. And, there are things that are required of us that would lead that certain disciplinary behaviors that a kid could do that would require us to suspend them from the class, from the school for a certain period of time. And the school I was at had a program for emotionally disturbed students. We already had an ATS program in place, an alternative to suspension program in place. And so I pushed back. And I'll tell you that within a year, I was told I really wasn't welcome here anymore. And so that's kind of, I don't know why. They would never tell me why I wasn't welcome anymore. I'd been at the district 18 years and, had positive reviews throughout and got promoted and been at the district office and done all those things I listed earlier. So that's the challenge of being a principal and having to work with a superintendent that maybe you don't have the level of trust in. Whereas I think if I'd said that to some other principals, they would have said, well, or superintendents, excuse me, they would have said, well, let's talk about that more. And when I was done, he moved on to the next principal and never mentioned it again. So, as I said, we had an ED, an emotionally disturbed program. We had about 20 kids in it. And there's only so many things you can do discipline-wise with students who are misbehaving. And to me, taking that out and saying we're not going to do it almost under any circumstances, when we really worked hard to limit our suspensions already, I didn't think made sense. And so I'm not afraid to push back. Obviously, I don't always pick the right times, maybe. I don't know.
Well, let's if we could dive a little bit deeper into this. It was, starting with the meeting. Were you the only principal that expressed that view?
I was the only one with an emotionally disturbed program on my campus. So I was the only one who expressed it in that way. I think most of us were like, well, we're already doing everything we can to limit our suspensions. But if that's what you want, we'll do that. And I remember a situation probably 3 months later where a kid came up behind another kid and assaulted him. That's the only way to describe it. We had the whole thing on video. He did it right underneath the surveillance camera. And I had to call the superintendent and explain why the kid should be suspended, which to me, that's ridiculous. That's an obvious suspension. When you sneak up behind someone, punch them in the head, crawl on top of them and start punching them in the face, totally unprovoked. There was nothing that led up to it that we could find. So it was one of those things where I felt the need to defend my staff. I can't put a kid who is going to be unsafe in a classroom with 35 other kids and a teacher. And so I felt the need to voice that, and I definitely voiced it the strongest.
So you were at this meeting, you were told that, and then you had to go back and tell your staff that this was the new initiative.
No, it wasn't so much as an initiative as it was a rule or a policy. So,
Okay.
we didn't go and put that out in the next staff newsletter, but I think people definitely could tell that we weren't making decisions as quickly as we had been. And so it was frustrating to not be able to do this. And like I said, we weren't doing it a lot to begin with. We had an
Right, right.
alternative to suspension program in place that we had been using for several years. So
Well, I can't imagine. I mean, that one that you just gave certainly impacts teachers, and not only impacts teachers, even if I haven't had a kid, even if I was a teacher and hadn't had recommended a kid on some discipline referral that I expected it to be a suspension, it's still just knowing that kids were not going to be suspended would have an impact psychologically on the teaching staff.
yeah, absolutely. But something that more directly impacts teaching, I remember again, same district, we had a very well-respected presenter come in, not named Jean Tavernetti, and she was there to talk about ELD and how to support our English learners. And it was very top down. And this was our back to school presentation. And I would say the teachers felt it was very condescending. Like she was talking to a bunch of first year teachers. When, yes, there were first year teachers in the room, but there were also 25, 30, 40-year veterans. Well, maybe not a 40, 35-year veterans in the room. And it went over like a lead balloon, and the teachers just resisted it. I would go back and defend the initiative and say the ideas that she's presenting aren't bad. They're actually quite sound, but the delivery was what caused the problem. And I think as administrators, sometimes we have great ideas, but it's the implementation that is lacking.
I think I was at that meeting. Well, not your staff meeting, but I was at the district meeting with the leadership. The presenter's first name doesn't start with a K, does it?
Oh, it does.
Okay, I was there. All right, I remembered that, and I remember I could tell you who I sat. I remember who I sat with, and we had a conversation in the back saying this is not going to be good. this is not good. This is not going to happen the way that they think it is going to happen. So
Yeah. But I don't know if you agree with me though, but I think, the ideas, what she was presenting were fine. They were all very sound and
yes,
technically you would, like first year teacher, you would absolutely have them do that. But teaching to a group of veterans, she was just came off very condescending, I
yeah.
think.
I know that there are things that when you're a principal, you're mid-level management, and you have folks telling you this is what you're going to do, and you have to be a good soldier, I guess is the only way to put it. Have you had
Not
to do
wrong.
that? Have you had to do that and your staff know that you're not behind this initiative? Have you ever had that come
Oh,
up?
absolutely. I mean, that the ELD example I gave, the staff knew exactly, where it came from. It was very top down. And again, very well intended, I think. Our English learners in California are still, struggling in many ways. There's pockets of excellence and pockets of really struggling. But I just think that those conversations need to be held like in advance. Like you don't do those kind of things to people, you do them with people, ideally. And so, yeah, I've absolutely had to go into that. And, I think as a principal, you get to choose how it's presented. And when I can, I will try to like break it to like if we have a leadership team on campus, like department chairs. And so I'll work with them to, okay, how can we implement this? And try to get them on board before breaking it to the whole staff. And so I've seen it done different ways. I'm not saying I've done it perfectly every time, but sometimes if you can soften it a little bit, the district may say, well, we want this done, I remember a superintendent just a few years ago who I respect and think he's amazing. He told the principals he wanted us to observe every teacher every week. And that is an awesome goal, but that's not how my week rolls out very often. And even with, 80 teachers and 4 administrators on the campus, that's 20 a week. That's a lot. Not impossible, but it's not going to happen every week. And that was what he wanted. And he wanted us to, document that. And so, when I went back to my leadership team, my admin and the department chairs, I was like, listen, we're really being encouraged to get out in the classrooms more. So we're going to get out in the classrooms more. I didn't ever say every teacher every week because one, I don't think that's a promise we could keep. And two, I didn't think they would appreciate it very much. At some point, it becomes, what are you watching us for? Why are you coming out? They realize, admin observing teachers is part of the job, but every week that seems a little like maybe somebody doesn't trust us.
So how did that go? How did you come close to the 20 a week or
Oh gosh, no. I
okay.
mean, if we got
Yeah.
15 or so, I'd be happy. And I think if you could talk to the people I worked with, they would tell you I like to observe classes. I really enjoy it. And, I think the last year I kept track. I think we did about 400 as an admin team in a year, which is a lot. And not just me, there's 3 of us, remember. This was my previous school, not here. And so, we were really trying to get into every teacher's classroom, but every week was just, there were too many meetings for one thing. It's hard to be in a classroom when you're at a 4-hour principal meeting on a
Yeah.
Thursday
Yeah.
morning or whatever day of the week it is. I didn't get any done on Thursdays when there were principal meetings. So yeah, there has to be some give and take and some flexibility. So yeah, I mean, I think I've shown people that I like being in the classroom and I'm more than willing, anytime anybody invites me, I'm going to change my schedule to the best of my ability to come sit in and watch your crazy new lesson or watch whatever you want me to. But yeah, that one every teacher every week was a lot. And I don't know how that rolls out in elementary school. I mean, I guess it depends. But where I was, most of the elementaries just had one principal, one administrator on the site with 25 or 30 teachers. And so I don't think it's any better for them.
Many teachers that I've talked to think that their principal, their site administration should push back a lot harder on these directives or initiatives from the district office. What's your thoughts about that?
Well, I think sometimes trust is broken between administrators on campus and teachers, and that's a really unfortunate thing. But I don't think rotating through principals more often is going to help that. And as a principal, I can tell you if you push back too hard against the wrong superintendent, you will not be there much longer. We don't have tenure as site administrators. We can be put back in the classroom if we work there long enough. But so like you said, we're middle managers. There's no union defending or supporting us either. And so we have to walk a very fine line between what the district office is asking and what we're putting in place. And so, when a superintendent or assistant superintendent or director, whatever the level, comes up with this great idea, sometimes on rare occasions, I think that what is happening is they're feathering their own cap, trying to get to that next level, padding their resume, so to speak. I implemented this, I implemented that. And I guess that's great for them if they really want to move on. As somebody who was perfectly happy being an assistant principal at Valencia High 20 years ago, and I'd probably still be there today, again, if somebody hadn't moved me along somewhere else, it's a challenge for those of us who are happy to be in one place because we're the ones building the relationships. And so much of what we do is, and you know this, is relationships with amazing, assistant superintendents or directors. And I don't want to drop like a bunch of names that nobody's going to know, but I can just tell you, for me, people like Candy Plahy was just amazing. And I know Jean knows Candy. And so, but she was supportive. She would listen. I never once felt talked down to, but if you go talk to like 5 teachers, you could probably find one that would say, would have something different to say. And that's because when you serve as an assistant superintendent or director, you still have bosses. You're still, in some ways, middle management. You've got a school board and the general public and the superintendent telling you, this would be good for that school or that would be good for this school or whatever. And so you can't be the one who says no all the time. You won't last. And so you have to strike that balance between, picking your battles, I guess, kind of like with having a kid.
Yeah. Well, just to go back to what you said about, no unions, no tenure, no nothing. I mean, you really, people have a lot to lose personally, not just professionally, but a lot personally. And I don't even think it's about courage to do it. I don't even think it's about having, well, I'm just going to leave it at courage. It could impact you saying no to somebody. All of a sudden you're on the street.
Yeah, I mean, here I am 2 years ago. I was 58 years old. I was in my 36th year, I think, maybe 35th year. I don't know. I've lost track. I'm going to say 35th year in education full time. And I'm out on EdJoin, looking for jobs. I'm applying here, there, and everywhere. And, I've got a wife, I've got 2 kids. They're both grown, but, one's still living with me. And so, I don't want to have to move. And in all that tumult that happened in Placentia Yorba Linda, a lot of people lost their jobs. And, they're still recovering from that. They're still looking, they may have found the next job, but maybe it was a step backwards. And so they're now looking for the next job, whatever it may be. And so it is a fine balance. And, and I don't want to give everybody a negative image because, I've worked with an amazing number of positive people who I don't think would ever do that to someone just for having a simple disagreement over an initiative, a plan to implement something in schools in a district. But at the same time, it could impact their job and their livelihood as well. So, I can't fault them for that if that's coming from the top and they don't feel like they have a choice. They've got to do what's right for them too. So, I mean, the hard part to me is there's so many things out there now that we could be implementing in education, but we can't implement them all at once. There's just no way. There aren't enough of us. And so, and teachers are the ones who bear probably, the biggest brunt of it with looking at, I've got this administrator asked me to do this and this administrator asked me to do that. They want, kids to put away their cell phones. They want every kid to be engaged. They want kids to be up and talking and moving around the room. They want, whatever the thing is that your district is currently asking for. And there's probably some great research behind it to say why this is good for kids. And so it's hard to know how to choose sometimes. And so you got to pick your battles.
You got to pick your battles. And like I said, is this the hill you're going to die on? And it sounds like your story. You didn't even realize it was that big of a hill that you were going to stick up for. I mean, keeping your campus safe, going to go back to, keeping your campus safe and suspensions. Who would have thought that would have, really irked somebody.
Yeah, that's not a real controversial thing usually.
Yeah, interesting. But you're happy now. You're happy in your position now. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm thrilled to be here. I have an amazingly supportive superintendent, assistant superintendents, the school board. Brea is a great place. And if you ever get a chance, stop by. We've got a beautiful high school up here. We overlook all of Orange County. I can literally, most days, I can see Catalina. And so it's a beautiful place.
Wow. That sounds great. Well, Joey, I could talk to you all day, but do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, I actually do. I want to talk to you. You've been around education for a while. You're not a young guy, no offense. But how do you, as like an educational consultant from that side of the business, how do you help schools or how do you deal with all the initiatives that, schools may come to you and say, hey, we're interested in this or this? How do you help them manage their expectations and their investment? Because, all of these take a little bit of money at least.
Well, what a timely question, because we're working with a district right now. One of the things that we always do in working anywhere is to visit all the classrooms so that we understand what's going on in the schools and then talk to district administrators about things. And so we were brought in with a specific purpose to help with instruction, to tighten up instruction. And when we were doing our walkthroughs, we found out that their teachers were using, I don't know, I think we were like 15 different technology platforms that teachers were using. We saw that they had two other consulting groups in the district. And we just wanted to know, what are these guys doing? And they weren't sure. They weren't sure what they were doing. So what we want to do is not because we want to control the whole process, but we want to be sure that when we're working with the staff, when we're working with teachers, they're absolutely clear that this is what we're doing now. It's not, it's not partly this, partly that. It's we're going to do this, we're going to get good at it, and then we can make further decisions. But it's a big thing of just getting, what is it, that the fifth point on the compass, where are we now? And understanding as much as we can, administrators, site administrators, teachers, district administrators, so that when we have any sort of advice to move forward, we know what we're talking about. We never come in, here's the CAD program. Here's a CAD program. You guys need to do this. And because otherwise, we're just like anybody else. It's just another initiative. So making sure that we know what's going on, so that when we talk to them, we're pretty clear that our data is going to be valid, reliable data.
Well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense because, like I said, there are so many initiatives in schools these days, and we're all, the next one is going to be, we have to have a new cell phone law by July 1st, at least in California. We just climbed the can't start school till after 8:30 hill here a few years ago. And so, nobody stopped to say, was that effective? Did that help anything? And so I'm glad to see you doing that. And I would say if I could give advice to people moving up in the world of education, take the time to get to know where you're at before you start trying to change too much. Because you may see some things you want to just jump on and change right away, but you may also burn some bridges. And it really is all about relationships and how you establish those relationships with people, how you build those with the people on the ground are going to matter in the long run, whether you're there or not.
And I think that's the goal of every leader, right? To put things in place so that when you're gone, the good things stay in place, and they're so embedded that somebody can't come in and push you over very quickly.
Yep.
Joey, it has been a joy, and glad getting to talk to you again. And maybe we'll see each other soon.
All right, Gene. Thank you very much. I enjoy being here.
Great. If you're enjoying these podcasts, tell a friend. Also, please leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. You can follow me on Blue Sky at G Tavernetti, on Twitter, X at G Tavernetti, and you can learn more about me and the work I do at my website, tesscg.com. That's TESSCG.com, where you will also find information about ordering my books, Teach Fast, Focused, Adaptable, Structured Teaching, and maximizing the impact of coaching cycles.